Everything begins with an end. For Dr. Elias Thorne, that end didn't arrive behind the door of Professor Alistair Finch's office, with its smell of damp, unbound books and antique paper. It came months after that door had closed under London's endless gray drizzle, in the suffocating silence of his own apartment. That autumn, London had taken on the color of grief. As the rain trickled down his third-floor window in thin, trembling veins, the city's noise transformed into a roaring sea, leaving a list stranded on his island of solitude. His apartment felt less like a scholar's sanctuary and more like a mausoleum of deferred dreams. The walls were lined with precarious towers of books, read and unread. Maps of various civilizations were piled on the floor, each one crushed under the weight of the adventure it once promised. The large oak desk in the center was a shrine to a single obsession, a single failure, the Callista file. With a weary expression on his face, illuminated by the blue light of his laptop, Elias scrolled through museum and university job portals. Specialist in cataloging Bronze Age pottery shards. Archival assistant for Mesopotamian seals. Each title felt like a small, sharp blow to his soul. The grand questions he had dedicated his life to, the profound patterns behind the rise and fall of civilizations, were now being replaced by inventory numbers and storage conditions. It was a slow death. It was the soul being placed on a dusty shelf. He tore his eyes from the computer screen and looked at the file on his desk. The single word scrawled on it in Professor Finch's shaky hand stood out like a scar. Callista, Alistair Finch. His teacher, his mentor, almost his father. And also the man who had led him to this dead end. Finch was a brilliant but obsessive giant, ostracized by the academic world, his chair revoked and his theories dismissed as romantic nonsense. He had dedicated his career to the Serpentina cult, a subject mainstream historians treated as a mere footnote, and had lost everything in the process. And Elias was left as his sole heir, his only student, the only one to carry this cursed banner. Every paper he wrote in Finch's defense was rejected, every application politely declined. Finch's academic sins had spread to Elias like an indelible stain. He sighed and pulled the file toward him. When he opened the cover, he was met with images he now knew by heart. A blurry satellite photo of an unnamed valley in Thessaly, a mosaic of green and brown pixels. A few poorly shot grainy pictures of the Trident column. And the yellowed paper with Finch's final notes. They understood balance. Elias, not energy, but that absolute, fragile harmony between energies. A tightrope walker's secret isn't in the rope itself or in gravity, but in the balancing pole in his hands. Without that pole, even the most skilled acrobat is nothing. Callista is the place where that acrobat, succumbing to hubris, threw away the balancing pole and was left alone on the rope in terror. Go and tie the rope again, son. Go and find that pole again. Elias closed the file. His career was on the verge of collapse because of this poetic drivel. A balancing pole. Yet all the world wanted was tangible proof. Gold, tablets, tombs. Inventory, not philosophy. Just then, the doorbell cut through the apartment's musty silence like a scalpel. Elias was startled. He wasn't expecting anyone. Peeking through the peephole, he saw a well-dressed, elderly man holding a leather briefcase. He opened the door a crack. "Yes, Dr. Elias Thorne?" the man asked, his voice both formal and kind. "My name is Arthur Thompson. I'm from the law firm of Cromwell, Blackwood and Finch. I was Professor Alistair Finch's solicitor and the executor of his will." Elias's brow furrowed. "Finch? But all the legal matters were settled months ago." "The general estate, yes," Thompson sighed, with a polite glance that implied a request to enter. Elias stepped aside and let the man in. However, the professor established a private trust years ago. His instructions were firm. This trust could only be opened 6 months after his passing, and only under specific conditions. That period ended. Today, Thompson sat in the armchair Elias gestured to, a space barely carved out from among the books. He placed the briefcase on his lap and carefully undid its nickel-plated clasps. Elias felt his heart begin to beat a little faster. This unexpected visit was like a pebble tossed onto the still surface of his stagnant life. The lawyer pulled out a thick, sealed envelope. Professor Finch left his general inheritance, his house, books, and personal effects to the university archives, as you know. However, he transferred all of his liquid assets and investments into this private fund years ago. Thompson paused, as if gauging Elias's reaction. The fund is named the Serpentina Foundation, and you, Dr. Thorne, are its sole beneficiary. Elias froze. For a moment, he couldn't process what he'd heard. Me, but the professor didn't have any money. In his final years, let's just say that in his final years, he chose to play the part of a destitute academic who had sacrificed everything for a lost cause, Thompson said with a faint, melancholic smile. Alistair was a brilliant man, but also a theatrical one. He managed his family inheritance in a way no one knew about. This fund is not a vast fortune, don't misunderstand, but it is, in his words, I believe, sufficient to cover everything. A tightrope walker needs to cross the rope. Thompson handed the envelope to Elias. All the financial details and conditions of use for the foundation are in here. In short, for the next 2 years, a fund is at your disposal to cover all of your research on Callista and the Serpentina cult travel. Equipment, lodging, local assistance, on one condition, A condition? Yes, the professor's condition. Before you begin the research, you must read this personal letter he left for you. This time, Thompson pulled out a smaller, yellowed envelope from his briefcase, sealed with wax and bearing Elias's name. Elias took both the official envelope with the financial details and the personal letter. His hands were trembling slightly. This was the moment the impossible became possible. The turning point of his life had been waiting silently inside an old lawyer's leather briefcase. Thompson stood up. My work here is done, Dr. Thorne. My card is in the envelope should you have any questions about the foundation. Alistair. He was a good friend, and he believed in you more than anyone. I hope this helps you find what he was looking for. After the lawyer left, Elias stood motionless by the door for a long time, holding the 2 envelopes. The city's roar was now a distant whisper. The suffocating air of his apartment had dissipated, replaced by an electric anticipation. He opened the official envelope first. The figures inside, the bank statements, the legal jargon. What he saw was mind-boggling. With this fund, he could stay in Callista not for 1 year, but for 3 if necessary. He could rent the most modern equipment, hire a small local team. Finch had left him not just a dream, but the key to making it real. Then with trembling fingers, he opened the personal letter. Finch's distinctive, sharp, and slanted handwriting seemed to carry the scent of ink right off the page. My dear Elias, if you are reading this, then I am nothing more than a memory among my dusty books. And you are likely going through the most difficult period of your career because of me. For that, I apologize. I am aware that I have been more of a shackle to you than a mentor. But I want you to know that my faith in you was always greater than the shallow opinions of the academic world and the musty decisions of its committees. I pushed you onto this path, yes. But I did not do it for the sake of selfishness or obsession. I saw something in you that I never had in myself, patience and intuition. I was an impatient fool who wanted to find the answer and shout it to the world. You, on the other hand, possess a soul wise enough to wait for the answer to whisper to you. The money. It is merely a tool, Elias. A tool to free you from your chains. Go to Callista. Enter that valley not as a conqueror, but as a student. Approach that column not as a monument, but as a sick friend. Listen to the silence there. Feel the imbalance. There, remember, we are not treasure hunters. We are detectives, tracing the great questions humanity has forgotten. And the greatest question is this: what is the difference between control and harmony? Callista is the place where this question was both asked and answered incorrectly. I know I have left you with a heavy burden. But I have known no one else. Who could carry it? Go and tie the rope again, son. Not for me. Not for yourself. For balance. Your friend, Alistair. When Elias finished the letter, he realized his eyes were wet. This wasn't a will. It was a handover ceremony, the passing of a torch. The weariness, the fog of despair that had enveloped him, suddenly vanished. He stood up and walked to the window. The London rain was still drizzling. But now, it felt less like an ending and more like the herald of beginning. A cleansing, where everything could start anew. He was risking his career. Maybe he was losing his mind. Maybe this was nothing more than an old man's final delusion. But what was the alternative? Cataloging pottery shards. Spending the rest of his life wondering what if. No, the decision was made. He turned back to his apartment. He closed the job portal on his laptop. From the pile of maps on the floor, he pulled out the largest one, the one showing Greece. He spread it across the desk, over all the books and notes. His hand hovered for a moment, and then, with a single decisive motion, he placed his index finger on that point on the map that no one knew, that no one cared about. Kallista. The journey had begun. The moment of decision was illuminating and instantaneous, like a lightning bolt tearing through the night. The weeks that followed, however, were chaotic and exhausting, like the thunder that follows, shaking the very ground. Elias's London apartment transformed from a scholar's melancholy sanctuary into the headquarters of a feverish expedition. The towers of books gave way to carefully labeled cardboard boxes filled with equipment. The single file on his desk was gone, replaced by a mountain of topographical maps of Thessaly, satellite images, and permit application forms. This process reminded Elias that an expedition was not just a romantic dream, but also a tedious nightmare of bureaucracy and logistics. The phone calls with the Hellenic Ministry of Culture and Tourism's Department of Antiquities tested the limits of his patience. Permits, stamps, notarized translations, official correspondence. Each step was a quagmire that slowed his progress. At the same time, he worked diligently to use Finch's generous fund in the most efficient way. He ordered a ruggedized laptop, a satellite phone that would work in the harshest terrain, and a state-of-the-art ground-penetrating radar and magnetometer. Each new delivery made his living space a little smaller, but brought his dream one step closer to reality. During this chaotic preparation, he also experienced a strange sort of cleansing. He began selling the academic books he had collected over the years, the ones he knew he would never read again. This wasn't just a move to create space. It was a ritual of shedding the weight of the past, of the labels that had defined him but now hindered his progress. With every book he sold, he felt a little lighter. He was no longer Dr. Thorne, who interpreted others' theories, but simply Elias, pursuing his own. But while Elias was living through this personal revolution in London, he was unaware that his every move was being watched thousands of miles away, from a tower of glass and steel, with cold precision. In Geneva, in an office overlooking the tranquil waters of Lake Geneva, testament to minimalist taste and absolute control, Magnus Corbin stared at the massive holographic screen before him. There was nothing superfluous in the office. The only ornament on his desk was a single black orchid, genetically engineered for perfect symmetry. The chaotic beauty of the outside world was reduced to a silent painting behind triple-paned, soundproof glass. The door opened silently, and a woman entered, her features sharp, her face expressionless, her suit expensive. Isabella Rossi was Magnus's chief of operations, an efficient and ruthless extension of his will into the world. Good morning, Mr. Corbin, Isabella said, her voice as precise as a machine. The report you requested is ready. A new window opened. On the holographic screen, the title read, Subject, Elias Thorne. Below it, all of Elias's activities from the past few weeks were listed. Bank transfers, a list of the equipment he had purchased, transcripts of his correspondence with Greek ministries, even a list of the books he had sold. Magnus's network reached a depth and breadth that would be the envy of state intelligence agencies. A faint smile appeared on Magnus's face as he slowly read the information. Professor Finch, he was a poor poet, he murmured. But like all poets, he unknowingly planted a potent seed, and his little acolyte is watering it with devotion. All his preparations point to an expedition, Isabella said. The estimated destination is the unmapped valley Finch called Callista. What are your orders? Shall we stop the operation? Magnus raised his hand. No. Quite the opposite. Let him go. He will be our canary in the coal mine. He turned his gaze to Isabella. His eyes were as cold and dispassionate as a surgeon's. History is a disease, Isabella, a chronic epidemic of passions, mistakes, coincidences, and chaos, endlessly repeating itself. And we are on the verge of its cure. Callista is our laboratory. What they call the imbalance, there is, in fact, the purest, most raw energy in the universe. The ultimate power that, once controlled, will create a perfect and permanent order, eliminating all of humanity's flaws, war, disease, even death itself. He spoke not as if delivering a philosophical lecture, but as if presenting a business plan. And Elias Thorne, he is merely the eager little assistant who will open the door to the laboratory for us. Let him solve the ancient riddles, uncover the traps, clear the path. We will simply follow him. Understood, sir, Isabella said. When should the observation team be deployed? The moment Thorne sets foot in Greece. A small two-person team will suffice. Echo 1 and Echo 2 are suitable for the mission. The instructions are clear. No contact, no interference. Only observation and reporting. I want to know when the canary stops singing and when it finds the vein of gold. Nothing more. As Isabella bowed her head silently and left the room, Magnus turned back to the window overlooking the lake. For him, Elias Thorne's fate was just another line item in a strategic plan. At that same moment, Elias, completely oblivious to this invisible web, was doing the final checks on his Land Rover. The time for goodbyes had finally come. As he handed the keys to his apartment over to the landlord, he felt he was leaving behind not just an empty flat, but a life. The familiar, gray, and safe chaos of London now belonged to a stranger. The journey was like moving through the layers of a dream. First, the white cliffs of Dover, then the claustrophobic dark of the Channel Tunnel and the endless fields of France. With every border crossing, the very fabric of civilization changed. The orderly highways of Germany, the majestic Alps of Austria, the ancient ports of Italy. As Elias crossed the Adriatic by ferry, he stood on the deck and let the salt wind lash his face. The rational, orderly world of the West was falling away behind him. He was moving toward the lands of the East, where myths and legends still hung in the air. This change became even more pronounced when he arrived in Greece. The air was warmer, the light sharper. Time seemed to flow more slowly. People's laughter was louder, the olive trees older, the silence deeper. As he left the modern chaos of Athens and steered north toward Thessaly, he knew the real journey was just beginning. Wide highways gave way to narrow, winding asphalt roads. Then those roads turned into gravel village tracks, and finally, to dirt paths marked only by tire tracks. Civilization was being peeled away like the layers of an onion. The phone signal disappeared. Radio stations were replaced by the howl of the wind. He was no longer guided by maps. But by Finch's notes and his own instincts, at the end of the third day of travel, as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, the Land Rover crested one last hill. And in that moment, Elias hit the brake stop below. The valley stretched out, cloaked in the golden and violet haze of evening, like the fallen palm of a god's hand. K-L-L-I-S-T-A. It was silent, ancient, and unnervingly inviting. Elias got out of the car. The exhaustion of a journey spanning thousands of kilometers vanished in an instant. His eyes locked onto the point in the very center of the valley, to the structure he once knew nothing about, but now knew by heart. Last rays of the evening sun reflected off a broken piece of a bronze monument in the middle of the valley. Glinting as if sight had momentarily returned to a blind eye, the trident column, Elias took a deep breath. Beneath the scent of thyme and wildflowers in the air, there was something else. An old metallic and sharp smell like ozone. The scent of imbalance. In a way, he had come home. The real work began now. Arriving in Callista was a conquest. Staying in Callista was an act of surrender. The first week was a brutal adaptation process, during which the last remnants of Elias's civilized world were shed one by one. The comfort and predictability of the city gave way to the capricious and indifferent rhythm of nature. At night, the silence of the valley was so dense that Elias could hear his own heartbeat like a drum. By day, the sun was a relentless overseer above him. He set up his camp in the shadow of a centuries-old olive tree on the eastern slope of the valley. This spot both overlooked the column and was sufficiently distant from the small settlement of a few houses at the valley's entrance. The Land Rover served as a kind of logistics base. On one side, his modest living space with a sleeping bag and a portable stove, and on the other, his mobile laboratory where he stored his sensitive equipment. Serafina, as promised, appeared silently at dawn on the second day. She brought no welcoming gift, nor did she wear an expression of curiosity. She simply stood and watched Elias's camp, his routine, his movements. It was a test. Elias knew it. Serafina was gauging his respect for the land, his patience, and his intentions. Elias didn't try to prove anything to her. He just focused on his work. He set up his equipment, organized his notes, and carefully collected his trash in a single bag. With every action, he tried to show that he was a guest, not a plunder. At the end of the third day, Serafina finally spoke. She approached him as he was taking notes over a map. "Your machines are too loud," she said, her voice as neutral as ever. She was referring to the low hum of the ground-penetrating radar's generator. "If you want to hear the earth whisper, you must first silence your own noise." Elias looked up. "These machines speak languages you cannot hear, Serafina. The difference is in density beneath the ground, the magnetic fields. They are also a kind of whisper." A faint, fleeting smile formed on Seraphine's lips, there and gone in an instant. "You look at the bones of the earth, stranger. I listen to its soul. It seems we both have things to learn." This was the first moment the ice broke between them. From that day on, Serafina began to visit daily. Sometimes she would watch Elias work for hours without a word, and other times she would share information about the valley's plants, animals, and seasonal cycles that wasn't written in any book. She taught Elias which snakes were venomous, which herbs were medicinal, what the direction of the wind said about the next day's weather. In return, Elias explained to her the possible meanings of the drawings on his tablets and the connections of the Serpentina cult to similar beliefs in other civilizations. One represented the wisdom of the earth, the other, the accumulation of history. Slowly, they were learning each other's languages. Meanwhile, Elias's presence had also become a subject of curiosity in the small settlement at the foot of the valley. This was a place where time had nearly stood still, where a few elderly families lived, refusing to abandon their ancestral lands. One evening, Serafina invited Elias to the village. It was an initiation into the community. She took him to the kosh, house of the village's eldest, Uncle Yorgo, whose face was as wrinkled as the valley itself. They gathered under the grapevine in the courtyard of the small stone house. Uncle Yorgo studied Elias with sharp, bright eyes. "So you've also come seeking the secret of that rusty pillar, boy," he said, his voice like water flowing over a bed of pebbles. "Many have come before you. Some sought gold, others fame. They all returned empty-handed." Elias bowed his head respectfully. "I'm not looking for gold, sir. I'm just after a story." This answer seemed to please the old man. Stories are dangerous," he said. "Our ancestors used to tell it. That pillar was the heart of a star that fell from the heavens. It protected our valley. But when an ambitious king tried to steal that heart, the star grew angry and trapped the king inside the pillar. When the wind howls at night, it's the king's screams you hear." Aunt Alini, her hands calloused, sitting right next to him, objected. "Oh, Yorgo, you're telling it wrong. It is the tale of a beautiful goddess. She cried so much when she couldn't be with her love that her tears merged to form that pillar. The valley's barrenness is from her sorrow, which has not yet subsided." Elias listened, mesmerized, to these contradictory legends, deformed by time and generations. He understood that they were all different echoes of the same truth. Ambition, loss, the disruption of balance. Though the stories changed, the core remained the same. This was an invaluable clue for him. He realized he had to search for the truth not in a single text or a single legend, but at the intersection of them all. But as Elias was slowly being accepted into this ancient world, the ruthless eyes of the modern world continued to watch him. A hill about 3 kilometers above the valley, beneath an advanced camouflage net, Echo 1 and Echo 2 were carrying out their mission with flawless discipline. Echo 1 was a former Special Forces soldier, a patient and silent observer. Echo 2 was an expert in technology and data analysis. Their miniature camp was virtually invisible. Every piece of equipment they used was designed to leave the smallest possible heat and sound signature. During the day, Echo 1 recorded Elias's every move with a powerful telescope. His camp setup, his conversations with Serafina, his interactions with the locals. He noted every detail. At night, Echo 2 worked to capture and decrypt the weak signals leaking from Elias's satellite phone and computer. That evening, Echo 2 finally had a breakthrough. He had broken the key to an encrypted email Elias had sent to a few colleagues in London. The content of the email was full of technical details and theories. But one paragraph caught Echo 2's attention. Double quotes. The local legends contain far more significant clues than I anticipated. They all speak of a moment of fracture and a lost object. Finch was right. The column is just a result. The real secret is hidden in the event that created it, and in what they call the heart at the center of that event. Echo 2 copied this paragraph and sent it through a secure channel to Isabella Rossi in Geneva. He added his own note at the end of the message. Subject is focusing on finding a key object, the heart, using local mythology. He is making progress. Your instructions? The reply came within minutes. It was a single word: watch. At his telescope, unaware of this digital storm, Echo 1 watched the small campfire burning in the valley below. Elias, sitting by the fire, was thinking only of the stars and the long, uncertain road ahead. Meanwhile, the loops of the invisible net around him were tightening with each passing day. The first act of the play was over. All the players were now on stage. The weeks that followed became an exercise in patience and frustration. Elias's state-of-the-art equipment, rather than unlocking the valley's secret, only dragged him into deeper confusion. The earth was covered in a kind of geological camouflage, as if deliberately hiding the anomaly beneath it. The ground-penetrating radar drew meaningless, chaotic patterns. The magnetometer's needle quivered as if in an epileptic seizure, never indicating a stable north. Elias felt as if he were trying to listen to a million radio stations at once. He couldn't find a melody in the noise, an order in the chaos. Every evening, he would transfer the day's data to his laptop, trying to analyze it with complex algorithms. But the graphs and numbers on his screen seemed to mock him. The valley's secret was resisting the brute force methods of modern science. One evening, with his nerves stretched taut, Elias was staring blankly at a graph when Serafina sat down, silently by the campfire. For a long time, she watched his tense face. "You are fighting the earth, Elias," she finally said, her voice mingling with the crackle of the fire. "You are trying to force a confession from it. But secrets are not taken by force. They are gifted to those who are worthy." Elias sighed wearily. "What do you expect me to do, Serafina? Sit and wait for the stones to speak to me?" "Perhaps," Serafina said, completely serious. "Or perhaps you are simply not using the right language. There's an old saying of the Watchers. The sun is the first watcher. It sees all secrets, but it reveals them only to those who know when and where to look." At that moment, the words sounded like poetic nonsense to Elias, but later that night, inside his sleeping bag beneath the terrifyingly bright dome of stars, Seraphine's words echoed in his mind. To those who know when and where to look. The next morning, Elias didn't turn on his equipment. Instead, he took out all his notebooks and sat down in his camp chair to read them again. This time, he wasn't reading for scientific analysis, but to find a pattern. Uncle Yorgo's imprisoned king, Aunt Eleni's weeping goddess. They were all different stories, but they had a common thread. They all pointed to a specific moment, an event. The king's screams were heard loudest on the winter solstice. The goddess's tears washed the sky on the summer nights when the Perseid meteor shower was at its peak. It couldn't be a coincidence. The legends were a collective memory, encoded with astronomical events. Elias's heart began to beat faster. He combined this knowledge with Seraphine's words. The sun is the first watcher. Perhaps the key wasn't under the ground, but in the sky. He walked quickly toward the village where Serafina lived. He found her in the small garden in front of her house, weeding. "Serafina," he said, out of breath. "The solstices. The legends are all tied to some kind of celestial event. Which is the most powerful? The one most spoken of?" Serafina straightened up and thought for a moment. Her gaze drifted far away, to the peaks of the valley. "The summer solstice," she said. "The longest day. Our ancestors believed that on that day, the sun whispered its deepest secret to the valley. The sun would pause for a moment, and the world would hold its breath. They called it the Day of the Standing Sun." Elias's mind raced. He checked his astronomical charts. The summer solstice was only 2 days away. These were going to be the most important 2 days of his life. For those 2 days, they barely slept. Elias calculated the sun's entire path from sunrise to sunset, its angles relative to the trident column, and the movement of its shadow. Serafina, in turn, told him which points in the valley the Watchers considered sacred, which rock formations had special names. Science and myth, like two pieces of a puzzle, were slowly fitting together. On the morning of the summer solstice, there was a tangible anticipation in the air. Before sunrise, Elias and Serafina climbed to a rock ledge on the western slope of the valley, the most accurate observation point according to his calculations. Elias set up his theodolite and prepared his camera. As the sun began to rise on the horizon, the valley was slowly illuminated. The column's shadow stretched across the valley floor like a giant crooked finger. As the hours passed, the shadow slowly shortened and changed shape. Elias took a measurement every 10 minutes, jotting down notes. High noon. The sun reached the very top of the sky the moment it paused. In that instant, magic happened. The shadow of the column's single remaining serpent head, normally a meaningless, distorted shape for a moment, for just a few seconds, transformed into a perfect, sharply defined arrow. And that arrow pointed to a seemingly ordinary rock face on the opposite slope, hundreds of meters away. "There!" Elias shouted, glued to his theodolite. "Serafina, look!" "The shadow is like a key." Serafina looked through the lens. At the spot the shadow indicated, normally impossible to notice, hidden under moss and lichen, was a faint, man-made carving. It was the symbol of the Ouroboros, a snake eating its own tail. It took them hours to reach that spot. After a perilous climb, they arrived at the rock face with the symbol. Elias cleared away the moss with his hands. In the very center of the symbol was a nearly invisible crack. When they pushed with all their might, they saw a section of the rock face swing inward with a groan, like a hidden door. Inside was pitch black and smelled of 1,000 years of dry earth. When they lit their torches, they saw they were in a small man-made cave. This wasn't a tomb. It was a sanctuary. Faded frescoes adorned the walls, star charts, drawings of the column in its original state, and figures of people performing rituals. In the center of the cave stood a simple stone altar. And on the altar, placed with care, was a sealed cylinder. Made of terracotta, holding his breath, Elias took the cylinder in his hands. It was heavy, and the seal on it was the three-headed serpent, symbol of the Serpentina cult. He carefully broke the seal and pulled out a scroll that looked like parchment, but was actually a type of very finely processed leather. He slowly unrolled the scroll. The writing on it was in an ancient dialect Elias had never seen before, but intuitively understood. It was the diary of Licinus, the last high priest of Callista. The first lines made Elias's blood run cold. Year 1. Since the ambition of King Lycomedes tore the heavens asunder. I write on the day of the standing sun. I am no longer a watcher, but a witness to a murder. Our king shattered not a monument, but a living being, the heart of our valley. And now we all pay the price for his sin. It all began for the heart of the Ouroboros. Simultaneously, on the hill 3 kilometers above, Echo One was breathlessly watching the events unfold through his telescope. Targets have found a cavity in the rock face. They've gone inside, he whispered into his radio. Stand by. They've brought something out, an object like a cylinder. Echo 2 immediately zoomed the satellite imagery to that point and activated the thermal cameras. Confirmed. There's a man-made structure inside the cave. Heat signature is minimal. It must have been sealed for millennia. Echo One focused his scope. Even more intently, he saw the scroll in Elias's hand. They've found some kind of document, a written material. In his office in Geneva, Magnus Corbin was listening to these communications on the screen before him. There was no expression on his face, but Isabella could tell that her boss was in a state of satisfaction he rarely displayed. Echo One's voice came over the radio again, this time more excited. Thorne is reading. He's reading aloud. One moment, he's repeating a word. I repeat, it could be a keyword. The word is Ouroboros and heart. A smile appeared on Magnus's lips, as cold and sharp as the perfect black orchid. Perfect, he whispered into the empty office. The canary has begun to sing. The rules of the game had changed. There was no longer just a mystery. Now there was a target, a name, the heart of the Ouroboros. And the hunt had officially begun. Neither Elias nor Serafina spoke around the campfire that night. Their silence was fed by respect, shock, and a measure of fear. As the orange light of the fire fell upon the 1,000-year-old parchment, the words of High Priest Licinus sat between them like a third entity. This was no longer a theory or a legend. This was a testimony written in blood and sorrow. They read the parchment over and over until the sun rose. Elias meticulously transferred every word, every symbol, to His laptop, while Serafina enriched the text with allusions and metaphors she remembered from the Watcher's oral tradition. Every line of the diary revealed the dimensions of the tragedy in even more horrific detail. High Priest Licinus did not just depict King Lycomedes as an ambitious man. He described him as a fearful tyrant writhing in the grip of paranoia. The king believed that neighboring kingdoms were using dark magic and curses against him. He saw the Serpentina cult's philosophy of balance as a weakness, and dreamed of chaos energy as the ultimate weapon he could use to launch a preemptive strike against his enemies. Before they can attack me, I will send the world's wrath upon them, he had roared. According to the high priest's account, the diary also clarified what the heart of the Ouroboros was. It was not a priceless jewel. Licinus called it the balancing core. It was a complex mechanism forged by the first Watchers from meteoric iron, obsidian, and other unknown elements. It was the part that took the raw chaos energy absorbed by the column's intake cap, neutralized it through a purification process, and sent it back into the valley as life through the release cap. The heart was the most vital organ of the entire system. When the king shattered the purification and release caps, he had hoped to reach the heart, but the mechanism had locked itself down against this assault. The heart remained deep within the column's broken body. The disaster, however, had already begun. The diary described those days in apocalyptic language. The day after the attack, the sky turned a sickly pale yellow. It was neither day nor night. The water from our springs tasted of metal. The crops in the fields twisted overnight, curling inward into meaningless diseased shapes. Even the most docile sheep devoured their own lambs. The valley had fallen into the grip of madness. This was not a swift death. It was a slow, rotting curse. Chaos, no longer purified, was seeping into the very veins of our land. Elias felt his stomach churn as he read these lines. The unsettling feeling in the valley, that aura of wrongness, was the remnant of a poison thousands of years old. The final pages of the diary described Licinus's despair and his last act. Before the king's men could try to shatter the column, to extract the heart, the high priest and his loyal Watchers had sealed the main entrance to the system's core, the purification chamber. Licinus's last words were a testament and a riddle. Their ambition will never reach the heart. I have sealed the main door with the old ways. The entrance is not the column itself, but its absence. Where the third serpent fell, its shadow still mourns. Until a day comes when someone who understands the meaning of balance arrives, the heart will continue its poisoned sleep in its broken home. Its absence. Its shadow still mourns, Elias repeated. What does that mean? Is it a metaphor? Serafina closed her eyes. For a moment, she just listened to the wind. The Watchers loved to use metaphors, she said, but they never spoke idly. Absence means absence, Elias, and shadow means shadow. Perhaps the answer lies in what is not there. With this new clue, their research took a new direction. They no longer focused on the column, but on the space around it, its debris. They spent the next 2 days systematically scanning the wide, rugged terrain surrounding the column. It was a massive debris field left by the cataclysm thousands of years ago. Broken marble blocks, crushed bronze fragments, piles of unidentifiable rubble. Despite hours of searching, they found no obvious entrance or seal. On the afternoon of the third day, Elias collapsed into his camp chair in despair. His brain was scrambling for a solution. We're missing something, he grumbled. He opened his laptop and brought up the three-dimensional reconstruction model of the column he had prepared based on the diary's drawings. In its original magnificent state, all 3 serpent heads were in place. Licinus talks about the king's sword, he thought aloud. It was a sword strike, not an explosion. It must have had a direction. He remembered a passage in the diary describing how the king chose the direction of the rising sun for his attack. He quickly typed on his keyboard. He applied the laws of physics to the model. If the king attacked from the east, and the force of the blow tore off these two heads, he said, turning to Serafina, ... we can estimate where they might have fallen by looking at the angle of impact on the remaining head, and the momentum of the largest fragments. The computer performed a complex calculation in seconds, and a probable impact zone appeared on the screen. It was an area about 80 meters northwest of the column, a spot that currently looked like nothing more than a meaningless pile of rubble. They went to the area immediately. At first glance, it looked no different from any other spot. Broken stones, dry grass. Just as Elias was about to give in to despair, Serafina stopped and pointed to the ground. "A shadow," she whispered. "Look." The sun was beginning to dip toward the west, and every stone on the ground cast a long shadow. But right in the middle, in a circular area about 3 meters in diameter, there was something strange. The depression there did not cast a normal shadow. It was as if it absorbed light, creating an artificial darkness that was colder and deeper than the shadows around it. This was the morning shadow, an indelible mark left by the absence of something. Excitedly, they began to dig at that spot. First, they cleared the dry soil and grass, then the small stones and rubble. After half an hour of effort, Elias's shovel struck a hard, flat surface. The clang echoed through the valley like a church bell. Together, they cleared the remaining soil with their hands. And there before them, just a hand's breadth beneath the soil, was a massive, perfectly preserved, circular stone slab. In its very center was the same symbol from the cave entrance, the Ouroboros. There it was, the main door to the purification chamber, to the labyrinth. For a while they both just stared at the door, holding their breath. This was more than a discovery. This was a step of no return. Opening this door meant throwing themselves not only into an unknown subterranean world, but also into the heart of a 1,000-year-old curse. Serafina knelt down. She closed her eyes, took a small flat river stone in her palm, and began to murmur something in the language of the Watchers. It was not a prayer. It was a request for permission. She was asking the spirits of the place, the wisdom of her ancestors, for passage. Elias watched her calm, ancient ritual. His own heart was hammering against his ribcage. But what he felt was not fear, but a strange resolve. His entire life, all his training, his mentor's legacy, it had all led him to this moment, before this stone door. When Serafina finished her ritual and raised her head, there was a new expression in her eyes. A calm acceptance. "The earth has given its permission," she said, "but it did not say what awaits us." Elias nodded. He placed his hands on the cold, smooth stone that had not seen the sun for millennia. He was ready to put his full weight into it. At that moment, in the camouflaged observation post on the hill, Echo 1 was whispering into his radio. "Targets have found a structure in the ground, northwest of the column. It appears to be a large, circular cover. I repeat, they may have found an entrance to an underground structure." In Geneva, as Magnus Corbin read the text appearing on his screen, he ran his fingers over a single petal of the flawless black orchid on his desk. That cold, expectant smile was on his face again. "And now," he murmured, "the curtain rises."